Can you believe that a man who spent nearly 20 years living in seclusion, no social media, no tours, owns a mansion overlooking the Pacific Ocean, a luxurious Napa Valley wine cellar, and once auctioned off his one-of-a-kind Mercedes-Benz 450 SL to support the San Francisco Giants Community Fund? A calm, quiet man who seemed to have stepped away from the music scene, yet suddenly filed a lawsuit against his former Journey bandmates, claiming they had taken control of the rights to 20 legendary songs he helped create. And that is just a small glimpse into the life of Steve Perry. A life full of surprises, luxury, and mysteries that leave the public both puzzled and in awe. Step into the world of a man where every note is a legacy and every life choice is a statement, voiced without a microphone, yet powerful enough to make the whole world listen. In 1957, in the small town of Hanford, California, where golden sunlight poured year-round over endless dairy farms, an 8-year-old boy stood silently in front of his grandparents' house. Before him, a car slowly pulled away. Inside it was his father, leaving for good. That man had once been the laughter at warm family dinners, the voice that sang lullabies at bedtime, the one who strummed his guitar in their tiny living room every weekend. But now, he was gone, and he didn't look back. That boy's name was Stephen Ray Perry. His father, Ray Perry, was not only a co-owner of a local radio station, but also a troubadour in the truest sense of the word. Ray would sing Portuguese folk songs on KNGS radio, melodies that flowed like an underground river through Steve's childhood. That voice, deep, warm, and laced with the distant tone of an old homeland across the sea, remained Steve's only lasting memory of the man who left him behind. After the divorce, Steve moved with his mother to live on his grandparents' farm, a peaceful place, but one riddled with hardship. His mother, Mary Quaresma, bore the weight of everything, working tirelessly to make ends meet while raising a son who grew increasingly quiet and withdrawn. Hanford, where they lived, was hundreds of miles from San Francisco. There were no theaters, no studios, and no music except the old love songs that crackled through the faint signal of a weathered radio. Just dry fields, cattle barns, and the haunting cries of cows echoing into the late afternoon. For a boy who dreamed of singing, chasing music in Hanford felt like chasing the moon. On the farm, Steve had to grow up faster than other kids his age. Before sunrise, he'd already be in the barn, a milk pail in hand, learning to milk cows and scrub feeding troughs. Breakfast was sometimes just a dry slice of bread, dipped in whatever peanut butter was left. He once said he spent hours beside an old radio, trying to catch a nighttime music show, only to have his favorite song cut off by static. And yet, those were still the most magical moments of the day. Just hearing one full line of a song, I felt like the whole world lit up, he later recalled. At age 12, on his birthday, his mother gave Steve a special gift, a small gold pendant shaped like a musical note. It glittered in the evening sun, not expensive, but deeply meaningful. The message it carried was clear. Music is a part of you, and you deserve to follow it all the way. Not long after, while sitting in the car with his mother, the radio began playing Sam Cooke's Cupid. The gentle rhythm, the soulful, resonant voice, it froze time. Steve stared out the window, but his mind drifted into another world. It wasn't just a song, it was an awakening, a calling from somewhere far away, yet impossibly close. I didn't say a word the entire ride, he recalled, because I knew, as clearly as if God had whispered it in my ear, that I was going to sing. From that day forward, Steve changed. He was no longer just the boy doing chores on the farm. He begged his mother for a used cassette recorder. He spent hours listening to famous singers, mimicking their runs, their high notes. He learned to control his breath by shouting into a pillow. He recorded himself and played it back, over and over. Day by day, his voice grew, richer, louder, more emotional. By the time he turned 20, Steve left his hometown, driven by a dream. He went to Sacramento, where he and musician Scott Matthews formed the band Ice. They recorded at Record Plant Studios, a legendary venue for music's greats. But success didn't come. Their recordings were rejected. No record label called back. No promises were kept. Still, Steve didn't give up. He joined Pieces, then Alien Project. But those years became a cruel cycle. Hope, disappointment, hope again, and disappointment once more. Night after night, Steve sang his heart out in empty studios, but the seats stayed vacant. The demos stayed demos. Then, tragedy struck. Richard Michaels, the talented bassist of Alien Project, Steve's confidant, and one of the first people to truly believe in him, died in a horrific car crash. When the news came, Steve sat in silence for hours in his apartment, unable to speak. Years later, he would say, "I felt like my voice died with Richard on that road." The pain was overwhelming. Steve packed up, abandoned his instruments, and left behind the California dream to return to Lemoore, the very place he once swore he'd never go back to. In a small, worn-out room, he lay for hours staring at the ceiling, not knowing where life would take him next. In that moment, music was no longer a dream. It was a wound. But what Steve didn't yet know was that in the darkest depths of despair, a light had quietly begun to approach. A demo he had once recorded with Alien Project had drifted, miraculously, into the hands of the very person who needed to hear it. And his life was about to change. Forever. But when one door closes, life, somehow, in its strange way, always opens another. And for Steve Perry, that door was called Journey. There are moments in life that seem small, yet they change everything. For Steve Perry, that moment began with a phone call. Hesitant, unexpected, but destined. At the time, Steve was living quietly in Lemoore, having nearly given up on music. He spent his days helping his family, playing melancholic melodies in his room, trying to forget the fire that once burned so fiercely in his heart. But his mother, the woman who never stopped believing in her son, secretly kept hope alive. One day, she persuaded Steve to take a call from Walter "Herbie" Herbert, the manager of a rock band called Journey. A forgotten demo Steve had recorded with Alien Project had somehow made its way into Herbie's hands. And after just a few lines, Herbie knew. He'd found what Journey was missing, a voice that could move hearts. Herbert once told the band that Steve was someone who could turn notes into gold. And he wasn't exaggerating. He didn't just hear a voice in Steve, he heard soul, emotion, the blood that could set a band on fire. At that time, the band was searching for a new direction. Journey had been known as a progressive rock group, technical, instrument-heavy, with complex solos that only music aficionados could fully appreciate. But with Steve, they began to evolve, from a band for the experts to a band for everyone, from street corner bars to truck radios driving across America. In 1977, Steve joined Journey, but not as a celebrated hero from day one. Herbie introduced him discreetly, calling Steve the Portuguese cousin of a crew member, just to avoid backlash from core members. Perry observed quietly, studying how the band played, how they connected, and waited for his moment to sing. And backlash did come. A segment of Journey's devoted fan base, who loved their intricate, hard-edged sound, were skeptical, even resistant to the band's new, softer direction. Some fans showed up at gigs holding signs that read, "Don't soften Journey." A few even claimed Steve would ruin the band's identity. But it was Perry, with his voice and emotion, who would silence them all. His chance came during a sound check in Long Beach. No stage lights, no crowd, just instruments, musicians, and a quiet room. But when Steve Perry opened his mouth to sing, everything changed. His voice, powerful, clear, overflowing with emotion, left the band stunned. Neil Schon, the lead guitarist, could only stare. Greg Rowley, who had handled lead vocals until then, quietly stepped back from the mic. And just like that, Steve Perry officially became the new soul of Journey. From that moment on, their journey entered an entirely new chapter. The first album to feature Perry's voice, Infinity, 1978, was not just a sonic evolution, but an emotional breakthrough. The opening track, Lights, with Steve's warm, honeyed vocals, quickly won over listeners. But that was only the beginning. 2 years later, Escape, 1981, was released, and everything exploded. They released Don't Stop Believin', a track that started with a simple piano and ended with an anthem, Never Stop Believing. With Steve's energized, heartfelt delivery, the song became an unofficial national anthem for everyone who had stumbled but never surrendered. Soon after came Open Arms, a tender, sweet ballad written from the hearts of men who had known heartbreak. The song peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 6 consecutive weeks and remains, to this day, one of the most beloved love songs played at weddings, anniversaries, and life's most sacred moments. For listeners over 50, Open Arms is more than a song. It's a portal to youth, a memory of holding hands with a first love at a concert, the golden lights of a dance floor, the crackle of a cassette player in an old car, a clumsy, fiery first kiss. Steve Perry wasn't just a singer. He was memory, emotion, a living emblem of a golden age. Success followed success. Journey released Frontiers, 1983, then Raised on Radio, 1986, both shaped by Steve's creativity and emotional depth. He didn't just sing, he co-wrote most of the songs, helping elevate Journey into one of the most iconic rock bands of the 1980s. And then, in 2017, after years of absence, Steve Perry was inducted alongside Journey into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. When Steve stepped onto that stage, his hair was silver, but his eyes still sparkled like the first time he sang Lights. He stood there, not as the young 80s heartthrob, but as a man who had lived through both heights and heartbreaks, still carrying the same fire that once burned through a childhood of struggle. The audience rose in a standing ovation, not just for the hits, but for the resilient, quiet, and emotional journey of an artist who never stopped believing in his dream. In a short but heartfelt speech, Steve said, "Thank you for keeping our music alive. Though I'm no longer with Journey, my heart has always been there, where it all began." A new chapter in his life had been written from the ashes of failure, using nothing but his voice and his heart. Leaving the spotlight of a legendary band is never easy. But Steve Perry was never afraid of challenges. He knew his voice and his heart still had stories left to tell. In 1984, at the height of his fame with Journey, Steve decided to release his debut solo album, Street Talk. It wasn't a goodbye. It was his way of telling his own story, in the deepest language he knew, music. The album opened with Oh Sherry, a heartfelt love song dedicated to his longtime girlfriend, Sherry Swafford. Steve once shared that he wrote it on a rainy night, right after Sherry had walked out of his life. But through the song, her presence lingered forever. Oh, Sherry quickly became a sensation, climbing to #1, 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, and selling over 2 million copies. The music video dominated MTV, then at its cultural peak, transforming Steve into a true solo star, independent of Journey's shadow. In the video, he's seen chasing a woman in a flowing white dress through a deserted theater. Romantic and haunting, like he's trying to hold on to a dream that's slipping away. But what made Oh Sherry resonate wasn't just the catchy melody or poignant lyrics. It was Steve's sincerity, the longing in his eyes, the real ache in his voice. It was the sound of a man who had lost something precious, but still loved with all his heart. Still, his solo career wasn't without criticism. Breaking away from Journey, many in the media questioned whether Steve Perry could truly shine on his own, or if he was merely a lucky voice in a big band. One article even accused him of abandoning his bandmates for a shot at solo glory. But Steve didn't argue. He let the music speak. In 1985, he joined the recording of We Are the World, the historic charity single led by Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie, bringing together the biggest names in American music to raise funds for famine relief in Africa. When Steve sang the line, "We are the world, we are the children," his voice rang out like a prayer, simple but full of strength. Among hundreds of stars, he didn't stand out through style, but through sincerity. His solo journey continued with For the Love of Strange Medicine, released in 1994. After years of silence, Steve returned with songs that were deeper, more mature, and tinged with melancholy, reflecting what he had lived through: loss, distance, and a music world that was changing far too fast. Though it didn't match the commercial success of Oh Sherry, the album solidified his place as a true solo artist. And then, Steve went quiet again. For nearly 2 decades, he vanished from the music world. No tours, no new albums, no media appearances. Many believed he had retired, retreating into private life like so many other legends before him. But the truth was different and far more heartbreaking. During that time, Steve fell in love with a woman named Kelly Nash, a psychologist who gave him new energy and purpose. She was battling late-stage breast cancer when they met, but their love blossomed like a miracle. Steve stayed by her side through her most difficult days, and then fate struck again. When Kelly passed, Steve said, "It felt like I lost my entire world." But sometime later, in a dream, he heard her voice, gentle, loving. "Keep singing, Steve." It was that whisper that led him back to music. In 2018, he released Traces, a soul-bearing album, a deeply emotional confession, a healing balm. The song No Erasing, with its lyrics of youthful memories, familiar roads, and a long-lost love, played like the inner monologue of a heart that had endured too much, but still knew how to love, to believe, and to hope. When No Erasing hit the radio in 2018, many older fans were moved to tears, not just by the voice, but because they saw themselves in every note. The years gone by, the words left unsaid, and a simple truth: it's never too late to begin again. In an interview, Steve said, "I used to think I'd never sing again. But then I realized music never left me. It was just waiting for me to come back." And the audience, especially those who had grown up with Don't Stop Believin' and Open Arms, welcomed him back like family. No gimmicks, no trends, just a voice and a sincere heart, enough to make the world go still and listen. After years of living for the music, Steve Perry finally began living for himself. And like many great artists, he has enjoyed his success with a lifestyle many only dream of: elegant, private, and utterly his own. As the stage lights gradually faded, Steve Perry didn't choose to disappear into the shadows like many other legends. Instead, he created his own kingdom, a life of lavishness and refinement, where every detail reflects his unique aesthetic taste and dazzling success. From magnificent mansions and expensive cars to splendid yachts and luxurious pastimes, Steve Perry lives like a king of rock and roll. Not ostentatiously, but just enough to make anyone marvel. Mansion in Larkspur, California, a private oasis amid nature. Imagine an early morning when the fog still lingers over the lush green hills of Larkspur, California. There, hidden behind towering pine trees and fences draped in wildflowers, lies Steve Perry's mansion, a masterpiece of architecture as if it stepped out of a dream. The house spans more than 4,400 square feet, with 3 luxurious bedrooms and 2 bathrooms paved with imported Italian marble, where Steve turns stillness into an art of living. Massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows open to majestic natural scenery, like a living painting that changes with each season. Inside, the interior is a blend of classic and modern. Deep crimson velvet chairs, hand-carved walnut tables, and abstract paintings on the walls, each worth tens of thousands of dollars. The main living room features a granite fireplace where Steve often sits with a glass of wine, watching the flickering fire and dreaming of new melodies. Outside, the swimming pool glows with LED lights like a galaxy, surrounded by an English-style garden with rose bushes and bronze sculptures. This is not just a house. It is a private oasis where Steve Perry is the king of his own kingdom. Vacation home in Del Mar, California. Immersed in the ocean. Farther south, in Del Mar, Steve owns another gem, a vacation mansion facing directly onto the Pacific Ocean, where the lapping waves sound like an endless symphony. This home is a symbol of boundless luxury, open architecture with transparent glass walls, so that every corner of the house is filled with light and the breath of the ocean. The outdoor infinity pool seems to merge with the horizon, with water so clear you can see the shimmering mosaic tiles beneath. Surrounding it is a tropical garden with towering palm trees, vibrant purple orchids, and a gently flowing man-made waterfall, like a soundtrack for the sunset parties Steve throws. Imagine him standing on the balcony, champagne in hand, watching the sun sink into the sea while close friends raise their glasses in a toast to life. The master bedroom is a miniature palace, a king-size silk-covered bed, automatic curtains that adjust the lighting, and a jacuzzi bathtub overlooking the sea, where Steve can soak for hours, letting the waves soothe the soul that once created timeless ballads. 1979, Mercedes-Benz 450 SL, a companion on every road. In Steve Perry's garage, among mechanical masterpieces, his silver 1979 Mercedes-Benz 450 SL gleams like a precious gem. This convertible isn't just a car, it's part of his soul. With a smooth V8 engine, luxurious cream-colored leather interior, and a roof that opens to welcome the breeze, it symbolizes freedom and inspiration. Steve once shared that he wrote many hit songs while driving this car along the California coast, calling it windshield songwriting, melodies pouring out as the wind blew through his hair and sunlight danced on the windshield. Imagine him wearing sunglasses, hand on the wheel, singing loudly down the highway, as if the whole world were his stage. In 2021, Steve auctioned off this car for charity, raising tens of thousands of dollars, a gesture both generous and affirming the timeless value of this beloved companion. 1986, Jeep CJ7 Laredo, a symbol of adventure. But Steve doesn't only love luxury, he's also passionate about adventure. His glossy black 1986 Jeep CJ7 Laredo, with warm brown leather interior and just over 11,000 miles, is proof of that free spirit. This off-road vehicle is nearly pristine, like a precious toy for a man unafraid of conquering new paths. Picture Steve driving it through the rugged roads of the Sierra Nevada, dust billowing behind, the roar of the engine blending with his laughter. This was the car that took him to unexpected places, deep forests, wild hilltops, where he found peace in the storm of life. In 2017, he auctioned off this Jeep and donated the entire sum to the community, once again showing the big heart hidden behind a life of luxury. Luxury yacht, a peaceful haven on the ocean. Though no official documents confirm it, with his love for the sea and massive fortune, one can imagine Steve Perry standing on the bow of a luxury yacht over 50 meters long, gliding across San Francisco Bay. This ship, possibly named Melody of the Sea, would feature gleaming teak decks, white leather lounges, and a sparkling crystal bar. On board, Steve hosts intimate gatherings with close friends, where wine flows freely and the sound of acoustic guitars rings out over the ocean. Or sometimes, he simply sits alone on the deck, gazing at the stars, letting the sea whisper new melodies to him. This is a high-class sanctuary, where he is the captain of his own life. Vinyl collection, a personal musical treasure trove. In his Larkspur mansion, Steve has dedicated an entire room to his vinyl collection, a musical treasure any devotee would dream of. Thousands of vinyl records, from original pressings of Sam Cooke, the voice that awakened him at age 12, to masterpieces by Jackie Wilson and Roy Orbison, are neatly arranged on hand-carved ebony shelves. A rose gold vintage turntable, worth tens of thousands of dollars, is the heart of the room. On quiet nights, Steve sits there, sipping wine, letting the old sounds ring out, like a time machine transporting him back to the days he first held a microphone. Art collection. A soul hanging on the walls. Steve Perry doesn't just sing with his voice, he lives through his eyes. His art collection is proof of that. Contemporary works by artists like Basquiat and Warhol, each worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, hang throughout his mansion like fragments of his soul. One abstract painting in fiery red, placed in his living room, was bought at a secret auction in New York, simply as a reminder to himself of the passion that never died. Every painting tells a story, and Steve often stands before them for hours, as if conversing with himself through lines and colors. Napa Valley wine, the taste of sophistication. In the basement of his Larkspur mansion, Steve built a wine cellar reminiscent of a European castle. Cold stone walls, dim lighting, and hundreds of premium Napa Valley wines arranged meticulously. Bottles from famous producers like Opus One and Screaming Eagle, each worth thousands, are his pride and joy. Steve often hosts wine parties for close friends, where the clink of crystal glasses rings like a small symphony. To him, wine isn't just a drink, it's an art form, a way to honor the luxurious life he worked so hard to build. Private jet travel, freedom in the skies. And when it's time to escape it all, Steve Perry doesn't wait in line at the airport like the rest of us. He steps aboard a private jet, possibly a Gulfstream G650, with white leather interior, massage chairs, and a sky bar. Every flight is an experience in luxury. Champagne poured at 40,000 feet, windows opening to endless skies, and absolute privacy. Whether flying to New York for an art auction or to Hawaii for a retreat, Steve turns every journey into a declaration. He doesn't just live, he rules the skies. Behind all these elite pleasures, Steve Perry remains a tireless artist, continuing to create value through music, smart investments, and quiet acts of generosity. Behind the glittering lights of lavish mansions and a life of luxury, Steve Perry has always remained an artist devoted to his craft. With brilliant achievements, refined investments, and a heart that never stopped beating for the community. A living monument of rock ballad. When we think of the 1980s, we may not recall every chart statistic, but everyone remembers Steve Perry's voice. A sound that could rip through sorrow and mend a broken heart within the span of a single note. As the lead vocalist of Journey, he helped shape one of the best-selling bands of all time, with over 75 million records sold worldwide, including more than 25 million albums in the United States alone. Songs like Don't Stop Believin', Open Arms, Faithfully, and Separate Ways weren't just hits. They were life anthems for an entire generation. In 2017, when Steve Perry was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with Journey, the entire auditorium rose to their feet in an ovation so long the host had to pause. When Steve walked on stage, he didn't sing, but his eyes said it all. A man who once thought he had lost music, now standing there, honored by millions. Rolling Stone once named him among the 100 greatest singers of all time, and John Bon Jovi simply called him The Voice. No further explanation needed. That voice became the standard by which all others are measured. His most valuable investment, a musical legacy. Steve Perry never chased the trends, nor did he invest for show. Instead, he chose to preserve the most intangible but everlasting thing of all: music. In 2006, he personally oversaw the remastering of Journey's entire catalog, adjusting every mix, every note, every layer of harmony, to ensure that future generations would hear the exact original essence that made the world fall in love with Journey. But he didn't stop there. Steve also invested in music publishing rights, an invisible realm that yields long-term value. Every time Open Arms plays in a romantic movie scene, or Faithfully is covered by a new artist, Steve is turning notes into gold, not just for himself, but for generations to come. This is investment from the heart, where the return is measured in emotion. A quiet giver of love. Steve Perry doesn't seek the spotlight, and that holds true for his kindness as well. Back in 1985, he joined the iconic We Are the World project, singing alongside Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie, Tina Turner, and others to raise funds for famine relief in Africa. When Steve sang, "We are the world, we are the children," his voice rang out like a prayer for humanity, honest, humble, and powerful. But what earned him even deeper respect was how he helped others quietly, far from the stage lights. After Kelly Nash, the woman he loved, passed away from cancer, Steve didn't give interviews or launch a charity in her name. Instead, he quietly sent large donations to cancer hospitals, supported research, and funded patients in need. Not for applause, but to spare others from the pain he had once endured. He has also auctioned off personal cars for charity, funded struggling artists during the pandemic, and consistently sets aside a portion of his income for education and healthcare foundations across California. A friend of the people. No titles, just heart. Steve Perry is a loyal fan of the San Francisco Giants, but he doesn't sit in VIP boxes or sneak in through backstage entrances. If you've ever sat in the stands, cheering wildly at a game, you may have unknowingly stood right next to Steve, the man blending in with the crowd, just like his music blends into life. He wears the jersey, caps his hair under a ball cap, grabs popcorn, and cheers with all his heart. Yet amidst the roar of the crowd, there are still moments when everything hushes, just to hear that voice join in the national anthem. A voice that has once touched millions of hearts. But not every beat in life is in perfect rhythm. Along the long road, Steve Perry has also faced heartbreaks, controversies, and silent stretches that felt like forever. His life, like his music, contains both the bright chords and the shadows. There is no glorious journey without cracks. Along the way, and the life of Steve Perry, a man who possesses one of the greatest voices in rock history, has never been a straight road. It has been uneven, thorny, and at times seemed to lead nowhere. The first departure, and a silent grief no one saw. In 1987, at the peak of his success with Journey, Steve abruptly left the band after the death of his mother, the woman who had planted the seed of music in his heart from a young age. There was no scandal, no blaming, just a quiet departure that shocked fans. No one understood why a man so beloved, at the height of his fame, would retreat into silence. But the truth was, it was grief. A private pain Steve didn't want the world to witness. He needed silence, to remember, to mourn, and to survive. Injury and a painful farewell. When Journey reunited in 1995, it seemed like a new chapter was about to begin. But just 3 years later, as the band prepared for a major tour, Steve suffered a hip injury while hiking in Hawaii. The band, under pressure from the label and sponsors, urged him to undergo surgery immediately to avoid delaying the schedule. But Steve refused. He wouldn't rush his healing, especially when a true artist's heart needs more than just a scalpel. So Journey replaced him with Steve Augeri, dividing the fan base. Half defended the band, the other half declared, without Steve Perry, Journey is just a name, no longer a soul. A controversial confession, and a door slammed shut. In 2001, on VH1's Behind the Music, Steve stunned everyone when he said, "I never truly felt like I belonged in Journey." The statement, though honest, felt like scissors cutting the last thread, connecting him to the band that made him a legend. Manager Herbie Herbert was outraged, comparing it to the Pope saying he's not Catholic. Fans were confused. Media stirred up debate. Some called Steve arrogant, others empathized. Behind every great band, there are wounds unseen. The legal battle, when notes become property. In 2022, Steve Perry made headlines again, this time for filing a lawsuit against Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain, his former bandmates in Journey. They had secretly trademarked over 20 classic songs, like Any Way You Want It, Separate Ways, Open Arms, without consulting him. Steve felt betrayed. Those songs weren't just recordings, they were memories, dreams, fragments of his soul. Though he later withdrew the lawsuit in early 2023, the incident left another scar on an already fractured relationship. But what makes Steve Perry truly respected is not the number of times he's fallen, but how he gets back up. He didn't attack anyone on social media. He didn't go to the press to play the victim. He didn't use scandal as a shortcut for a comeback. He simply chose to return to music, quietly and with integrity, to what had always made him whole. Steve Perry was once famous. He's been silent. He's been praised. He's been misunderstood. He lost his mother, lost the woman he loved, lost the band that defined his youth. He was even cast aside from the very Journey he helped build. But he never lost himself. His voice, though no longer heard on stage often, still lives in millions of hearts. And his life, with all its quiet turns, its scars, and its comebacks, has become a ballad of its own, an immortal one. "I used to think music had left me," he once said, "but then I realized it was me who walked away. And music was always there, waiting for me to come back." And he did return, not to conquer the world, but to remind us all, no matter your age, no matter how many times you fall, it's never too late to live your dream again.